Jordan Montgomery fires Scott Boras, and Ippei Mizuhara gambles a lot of Shohei Ohtani's money. Coming up on Be Safe Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of Be Safe Daily. Rest in peace to Norm Macdonald, who would have loved to have been here on a day like today. Welcome into the show. It's Brenden Schaeffer. With no St. Louis Cardinals game on Thursday, we're going to talk about a couple of other topics in baseball that I think could be relevant to the general interests of the listeners of this show. One of the biggest stories in sports going on, Ippei Mizuhara, the interpreter, or I should say the disgraced former interpreter for Dodgers superstar Shohei Ohtani. Well, more information came out about him today with the criminal complaint being filed against him for allegedly stealing from Shohei Ohtani. We knew, $4.5 million. That's what had been reported before. It's $16 million, the number, and now we've got a whole lot of details with that criminal complaint being filed. And the text messages, my goodness, are a sight to behold. If you read any of the document, we'll talk about it a little bit. But I also wanted to talk about an area of interest to Cardinals fans, specifically as it pertains to Jordan Montgomery, because a lot of Cardinals fans were hoping maybe the Cardinals could swoop in at the last minute in this free agency period where Montgomery kept being available and maybe sign him late. Well, that didn't happen, but Jordan Montgomery seems to have some regrets about how the process went for him this offseason, as he has fired Scott Boras, or at least switched agencies. I don't know how else you'd frame that. He had a guy, he doesn't anymore, and is now with a new group after the debacle that his free agency turned out to be. And he wasn't the only Boras client who had a rough offseason. So has old Scott lost his fastball. Not a great winter, not a great look for the most prominent agent in baseball. If you like baseball content, if you like St. Louis Cardinals content, hit that subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And it's interesting, I get these analytics from YouTube that tell me 52% of the hours watched on your channel came from subscribers. That means 47% of you are out there watching the channel pretty much religiously, but you don't subscribe yet. Hit that button. It's right there on your screen. Hit like on this video and drop your comment below with your thoughts on anything going on in sports. Now, this is primarily a baseball channel, but you got, obviously, the O.J. Simpson news, which I cheekily referred to at the beginning of this show, if anybody caught the reference there. Thank you, by the way, to those who caught the I think you should leave reference in yesterday's podcast. A couple of you replied on YouTube mentioning the show as I had requested. And so if it was a joke for two people, I'm still glad I made it because that's a great show. Check it out on Netflix if you haven't seen it. But in the case of baseball content, subscribe to this channel. And on Spotify, if you just search Be Safe Daily, you'll get sometimes some things on that feed that you don't get on this particular YouTube channel, because Charlie Marlowe and I recorded Low Hanging Fruit, our Cardinals podcast that we do weekly, semi-weekly. We put that out earlier today. You can go to Charlie's YouTube channel if you subscribe to him. It's on there. But if you prefer to listen on Spotify, that's on the Be Safe Daily podcast feed as well. Almost an hour of good old-fashioned Cardinals talk as we get into a little bit of everything. So that was earlier on Thursday. I don't know if I said the date today, but it's Thursday, April 11th, 2024, as I record this in the evening for your morning commute on Friday. We got the Montgomery story and the Mizuhara story. I don't presently have the documents pulled up for Mizuhara, so I guess I'm going to start with Jordan Montgomery and talk about the fact that he has now switched agencies to Wasserman, with Joel Wolf as one of his representatives now, after he signed the 2-year contract in the offseason that really is a 1-year contract, but it's got the incentives, the vesting option, essentially, where Montgomery can turn that into a 2-year deal. But this was for a guy who absolutely lit it up in the postseason, was good in the World Series. This guy should have got more than a 1-year deal with a vesting option. At age 31, this was his chance to get a slice at the apple, to take a bite. And instead, he ends up signing a 1-year, $25 million deal, and then it's a player option, a vesting player option for 2025. That is not the way it was supposed to go for one Jordan Montgomery, who pitched with the Cardinals last year, and as you may recall, was one of the few bright spots of the St. Louis rotation with the struggles that the Cardinals had in 2023. And I want to know what Cardinals fans and baseball fans in general think about the fact that Scott Boras is maybe not panning out for some of these players the same way that it used to be. It used to be, oh, Scott Boras, he's kind of a hard ass, but your players are going to end up taken care of because he's the best in the business. Was this an offseason where the game has changed on Scott Boras, or is it just an isolated incident where, hey, look, it just so happened that some of the biggest players in this offseason free agent market were Boras clients, and this was a bad offseason to be a marquee free agent? Is it the chicken or the egg? Well, Jordan Montgomery certainly seems to have a take on it, and he's a no bones about it kind of guy. So it doesn't surprise me that it goes the way it went, and he said, hey, you get your commission or whatever it is on this contract, but somebody else is going to handle the next one. It kind of reminds me of how at the beginning of the 2023 season, Jordan Montgomery was asked, it was in April. It was still early in the year at this point, about, contract extension. Did you guys talk about it with the Cardinals? Was it anything that ever came up? And it basically was, well, they didn't really approach me in spring, and now it's no longer on the table. I might have been amenable to it before. Those conversations really never got off the ground, and we're going to let this season play out. And, of course, that was maybe along the times, too, that all the Contreras stuff was going on. And if you look at the game logs, it was very much a rare occasion that Montgomery threw to Wilson Contreras, so connect some dots there, and you might figure he was not at that point amenable to say, yeah, I'm going to sign a contract with a team it's not playing well in April, and I'm not so sure about if we're establishing the rapport with the catcher. Again, I'm not blaming Wilson Contreras for that, but I think it is just maybe part of the dynamic at the time for a guy like Jordan Montgomery. And if you're Montgomery, it worked out the best that it possibly could have. And something that was so interesting that I'll never forget is after he was traded, he did a media scrum with the St. Louis media, which he didn't have to do. He could have said no, but he figured, I'm here. This is kind of my goodbye message to St. Louis. But it was a whirlwind day for him. Finds out he's being traded during the game. After the game, he's still in there, which is I don't know if it's just one of those deals where Jordan Montgomery is just kind of an everyman. He's just one of the, just regular dude. And so it doesn't occur to him to do what a lot of, high-profile players might have done in that situation and go, I'm going to FO here. I'm not going to let, these media get a quote out of me and show my face when they're still, I'm going to hide somewhere in the back. No, he was happy to talk for 5 or 7 minutes on the day of his trade, which I just think is just an interesting thing. You don't always necessarily see that from guys who are really, he was under no obligation at that point to talk to the St. Louis media about the trade, but was gracious enough and willing to do so. So that's something that I won't forget about Jordan Montgomery. But he strikes me as kind of what you see is what you get almost. And in the case of his offseason where he pitched his butt off last year and was in a prominent role on a playoff team, with Texas, he was even better than he was with the Cardinals. 3.42 ERA with St. Louis. He went to the Rangers for the final 11 starts of that regular season and had a 2.79 ERA. So for the season, ended up at a 3.20 ERA, 32 starts, almost 190 innings pitched. Had some really, really nice moments with the Texas Rangers. And then you should think that he'd add a little bit to his bag of money with the way that he pitched in the 2023 postseason. He had a couple of rough outings, but mostly was really, really rock solid. 7 innings, no runs, and then had a 4-inning, 4 earned run outing. 6 1/3, scoreless. That was against Houston in the ALCS, which is a pretty big stage. Won that game for his team, going into the 7th inning. 5 1/3, 2 runs. Came out in Game 7 of that ALCS, 2 1/3, no runs. And then in the World Series, that was the game that the Rangers lost that he pitched, 6 innings, 4 runs. And so maybe, does it have an adverse effect? But overall, a pretty darn good postseason for Jordan Montgomery, to where you would have thought a 2.90 ERA in 6 postseason appearances, 31 total innings. That's a guy that's performed in the clutch at this point, and it just didn't happen. Long-term deal at age 31 where you still feel 4 or 5 years should have been absolutely within the realm of expectations, and it just didn't happen. That market simply did not develop. And now you've got this narrative. I'm looking at this article from Bleacher Report. This is from late February. Scott Boras is the biggest loser of the MLB offseason. Cody Bellinger, Blake Snell, Jordan Montgomery, Matt Chapman, J.D. Martinez, all clients of Boras. The contracts that MLB trade rumors projected for these guys at the outset and the difference in what they ultimately got it almost boggles the mind how it just didn't end up panning out for really any of these players. Now, I would say this, that MLB trade rumors, as much as I do think they aggregate the content and they do a nice job of when there's something out there, they put it up. I don't know 100% who's behind their contract calculator, and I think it's a little bit misinformed and not always in touch with what the market's going to be. Like, it's good for, and I don't really think, when people throw around the term clickbait, I think it's a lot of times disingenuous. Not the people that are writing these articles, it's the people that are just claiming clickbait, when in reality, I don't think that kind of stuff actually happens on a journalistic level as often. There are clickbait sites out there. The national writers for, I'll even just come out and say, it's a cesspool on Facebook. If you're in one of those Facebook groups, a lot of those groups can be a lot of fun for fans to interact. But it seems like the pages, some of these pages, there's one that was true St. Louis Cardinals fans, and like, it's great. It's probably 160,000 followers. I'm not going to knock anybody for doing their business. That's pretty cool that you're able to come up with being an admin of a group like that. That's awesome. But some of the articles that get posted is it's just a bunch of regurgitated crap that has a clickbaity headline that's going to inspire 250 Facebook comments, and everybody's going to like the article. But if you click on it, it's like, this is actually not even saying anything, or it's majorly misconstruing what actually happened in the clubhouse. If they're using a quote or they're pulling from a reporter's tweet, a lot of times those things are taken out of context. And that's why I always try to give the credit when we're talking about something on the podcast and make sure you guys are aware, like, hey, know where you're getting your information from, because on Wednesday, I wasn't in the clubhouse. I wasn't there for this post game or whatever the case. And then I'll say in a different episode, hey, on Tuesday, I was in the Cardinals clubhouse and I talked to this guy. Like, just be completely upfront about what we're talking about on a given day. We'll do a daily podcast, but that doesn't mean I was boots on the ground for every single one of those days. So that's my random soapbox rant that I somehow stumbled into. But it makes me mad when I see an article that says Ollie Marmol has a scary quote about Cardinals' early season struggles. Like, all right, that's kind of what I'm talking about. So if you wrote that article, sorry, I didn't mean to put you on blast like that. But that's the kind of stuff that I look at, and it just, your eyes glaze over because you know any better to not look at it. But 140 people commented on it, so they're getting the attention of somebody out there. Anyway, to get things back on track, it's not to say that MLB Trade Rumors is doing that necessarily. I think they do try to provide context when they aggregate the content that they put out. But in the case of the calculator, it's hard to know what a market's going to be. And in this case, Cody Bellinger signed, what did he sign? A 3-year, $80 million deal. 12 and 264 was MLB Trade Rumors projection. For Blake Snell, they projected 7 years and $200 million, which, like, the dude won the Cy Young. So I'm not trying to put MLB Trade Rumors out for that prediction, because honestly, he should have gotten something close to that. But then you look at the other side of it, and it's just, if enough individual teams are placing a bet that, like, Blake Snell health-wise isn't going to hold up, whatever the case, then I guess that's how you end up with 2 years, $62 million. That's the deal that he signed with San Francisco. Again, 7 and 200 down to 2 and 62. Jordan Montgomery's was 6 years, $150 million was the projection. I can't decide whether to say prediction or projection, and it's catching me every time. I didn't think Monty would get $150 million. I thought he'd get $100 million. I thought 5 and 100 would possibly be, or at least, 4 and 75, 4 and 80, something in that range. But got the $25 million a year for the first year. But it's like, unless you get AAV and term and in multi-years, shouting out the AAV, the average annual value, doesn't mean very much if it's a one-year contract. I don't know what kind of deal Matt Chapman signed, but he was projected as well by MLB Trade Rumors to have a pretty big deal. 3 and 54 is what he signed with the Giants. Credit to the Giants, though, for, I guess, having a good enough relationship with Boras to where he brought them two of his marquee guys. 6 and 150 was the Chapman projection, and ultimately, again, 3 and, what was it? What did I say? 3 and 64, something like that. So Scott Boras did not have a great offseason. I don't recall hearing if any of these other guys fired him, but Jordan Montgomery, I think he's kind of the no-nonsense guy of the group, and he made a decision that was like, look, I didn't feel very good about the way this went down. And as a pitcher, like, that puts you in a bad spot, too, to where you don't sign until the season basically begins. Spring training is over, and then you're into a position where your new team is like, okay, buddy, so when can you pitch? And then do you potentially risk ramping yourself up too quickly because you feel that pressure to join your team, and that could cause you injury or poor performance or whatever the case might be there? Like that's kind of the other side of that whole thing. And it is exactly why it's not an ideal situation that Montgomery was in. Now, Jen on Facebook, or pardon me, not on Facebook, on Twitter, because I tweeted about Montgomery firing Boras, and I said, hard to argue with the decision after how it played out this winter. Jen said, Monty is a grown-ass man who allowed this too. He overplayed his hand just as much as Boras. I understand Jen's point there, but it is also a tough thing if you're the player. You're supposed to just kind of let your agent handle it. How many times have we heard a player be in this position where it's a contract year or the potential extension or whether it's arbitration? I'm going to let the agents handle that. I just don't want to have to think about that. I just want to think about playing. In a lot of ways, I think that's the way it works. Some guys are going to be more hands-on in their process than others, or they could bring their agent, say, hey, I got a list of teams. Can you reach out to these teams and see if maybe something could be done? That sort of. In the case of Montgomery, I'm not going to say he overplayed his hand because I don't know exactly what he was asking for. But I think a lot of players place their trust in Scott Boras when he's their agent. And for some of them, and the majority of the big-name guys this offseason, it did not go their way. So let me know, Cardinals fans, what do you think of the fact that Monty is sticking it to Boras a little bit? After he's, it's all done and dusted and he signed his short-term deal, he says, yeah, you're not going to be in charge of the next one. I think it's kind of interesting that it ended up playing out that way for Jordan Montgomery. And honestly, I'm not too surprised. If you would have given me that list and said, hey, which of these guys is most likely to fire their agent a week and a half after signing, after not being pleased with the way that it was handled, I would have probably had Montgomery at the top of that list. Like I said, I think he's just kind of a no-nonsense type guy, and that results in him just saying, hey, this is what it is, but your services are no longer required here, essentially there. All right, let's get into the Ippei Mizuhara stuff. There is a official USA versus Mizuhara criminal complaint, United States District Court for the Central District of California, United States versus Ippei Mizuhara as the defendant. Criminal complaint by telephone or other reliable electronic means. So we've got some official documents now as it pertains to the illegal gambling allegations, the fraud, the stealing of finances from Shohei Ohtani by Mizuhara in order to pay off these gambling debts that were taking place with an unauthorized illegal bookmaker who just so happened to be under federal investigation, operating out of California, where, of course, you can't have a legal gambling operation. So anyone operating there in California would be doing so illegally. But and again, this criminal complaint, this document is like 36 pages, 37 pages long. So there's a lot in here that I haven't read through yet. But I got so fixated on the text messages, the communication between Mizuhara and those who are labeled Bookmaker 1, Bookmaker 2. I think there's even a Bookmaker 3 in here because the way it kind of works is this guy's in charge of the sports book, but he might communicate with, an underling, an agent, as it's called, and most of the communication might be with that guy, but then the big boss is like, hey, you're not paying the money, what's going on? And then maybe there's another third entity that person answers to. I think in here it said an Indian book because the individual's phone number was in there as the guy's name and Indian book. So I don't know if there's a Native American reservation where there was a sports book that they were funneling some of this through. I don't really know all the details of it, but I want to focus on the text messages because it's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy, some of the stuff that was sent here. And what I will say is this. I think a lot of the speculation on this entire saga pertained to whether or not Shohei Ohtani knew what was going on or perhaps even what was placing some of these bets through Mizuhara. And in reality, Shohei was the one doing the betting. I think a lot of people were skeptical and wondering if that might have been the case. After reading through some of this criminal complaint and the text message communication, I don't think for a second that Shohei was involved in placing these bets. And the other part of it is that I think is major for Major League Baseball is that over 19,000 bets were placed by Mizuhara, and they have no evidence that any of them were placed on Major League Baseball, which is very interesting that the guy's got not enough integrity to not steal $16 million from his supposed best friend that he's the interpreter for, and he kind of runs his finances in the way that it sort of played out ultimately. He doesn't have the integrity not to do that, but he has the integrity to know not to bet on baseball. I mean, that is and integrity is not the word that I would actually use there. Blind luck, dumb luck, at least on the part of MLB, because it would be a much different kind of scandal for them if it came out. Yeah, he was placing a bunch of bets on Angels games, and it's just a slippery slope that could have implicated Ohtani. I don't think that's the way that this is going to end up, not based on what we're seeing from the criminal complaint. So I get that out of the way first because I know that that's probably a question a lot of people have. I see the comments on Twitter. I was skeptical about some elements of it myself before this comes out on Thursday, where we're like, okay, now we actually get some information about this. Shohei didn't know about this stuff. I don't think there's any way that he did, because the text messages that Mizuhara was sending to this bookmaker reek of desperation. Like, it looks, at least the way it reads to me, it reads real. It's very kind of raw. Looks like this all started in late 2021. Mizuhara messaged bookmaker 2. I'll be reading all of this from the criminal complaint. Quote, "I've just been messing around with soccer. There's games on 24/7, LOL. I took UCLA, but they lost outright. 3 exclamation points. So he's like commiserating to the bookie that he's placing these bets with, but losing. And it's the very beginning. And he's like, LOL, there's always a game on. Like, that's the first sign that's like, uh-oh. This, he's about to enter into a world that's going to be problematic. And a lot of text messages about figuring out like how it works. How do you withdraw money or you get money? And there's some kind of mundane information about that. And then he kind of starts racking up some debts with this bookmaker. And a common trend line that you see throughout the remainder of these texts is Mizuhara asking for a bump, which means like a bump in his credit. Because when he's doing these bets, the way you can rack up, and I don't know how this would happen. I guess the bookie figured he was good for it because he made some payments sometimes. But the way you rack up millions of dollars in debt like this in a gambling situation is not because you swipe your credit card and you've got your money on a like a DraftKings or whatever, and then you've got that amount in there. It's you're betting on credit. The basically it's a website where they would say, yeah, how much imaginary dollars do you want to bet? Except it's not imaginary. Eventually, if you lose it, you have to pay it back. And so I guess he just kept losing a bunch. And then it was like just continuing to ask for more and more. And it is sad because you can kind of tell within this, like, this guy had an issue. He had a problem. To continue to say, hey, this is the last one. I really need this last one. A lot of texts about trying to figure out how to wire the money. It keeps getting canceled. Like, I imagine if you're sending that amount of money, probably difficult to figure out how to do it without, arousing suspicion. But I want to scroll. I'm reading these texts, reading through here. I want to scroll to this part where this was November 2022. One of the texts, I'm terrible at the sports betting thing, huh? LOL. Any chance you can bump me again? As you know, you don't have to worry about me not paying. Another text from that December. Can you bump me last 200? And I think that means 200,000. He says at one point, I swear on my mom, this will be the last ask before I pay it off once I get back to the States. Sorry for keep on asking. And the bookmaker responded and said, no problem, done, bud. Merry Christmas. Oh, it just gets deeper and deeper. June 22nd, 2023. This, I think, was the one that I was trying to find. June 22nd, 2023. Remember that date. Mizuhara messaged the bookmaker. Quote, I got my ass kicked again. LOL. ... Any chance I can get one last bump? More credit so I can bet without having to pay it. And maybe I can win it. Like, this is me talking. Maybe he can win it back so that he won't owe the money that he already owes. This will be my last one for a while if I lose it. The bookmaker says, okay, I just want to be able to communicate with my partner. Like, this guy's racking up a lot of losses. As long as you can pay $500 per week, we'll let you bet whatever you want to bet, because if that money's coming in, they're going to be good with it. But I think that 500 means 500,000 in the scope of their conversation. And that's from June 22nd. He's like, can you just get me another bump? I just need to have some more credit to be able to bet. The next day, June 23rd, 2023, quote, I'm the worst, LOL, can't catch a break. Can I get one last bump? I swear this is going to be my last until I get the balance down significantly. I promise this will be the last bump for a while. Okay, no problem, done. So like that was literally the day later. The next day, June 24th, quote, I have a problem, LOL. Can I get one last bump? This one is for real. Last one for real. And then the bookie said, done, and then kind of commiserated with him. I have the same problem, laughing face. To be honest with you, as long as you can guarantee the 500 every Monday, I'll give you as much as you want. I know you're good for it. Again, I just have to clean it up with my partner. That's the one reason I was asking before. That's 3 days in a row where he says it's going to be the last one. And then this again and again, I don't know if it was 500,000 each day or what it was, but it's like, oh man, you shudder to think about the spot he was putting himself into, because he was just absolutely, and then later asked him if he can settle on an amount. I've lost way too much on this site already. Of course, I know it's all my fault. This guy was down bad, folks. He was down bad, and it is a sad thing. But on the other side, like, he committed these actions. He's going to, again, if this is all alleged, but man, the way it stacks up isn't looking good. And then there was the text from March 20th, 2024, which was like the day all of this was breaking and the Dodgers fired him. He and Mizuhara and this bookmaker were communicating. Ippei texted him, have you seen the reports? And the guy texts him back and says, yeah, but I know it's all BS. You obviously weren't stealing from him. That's just a cover story. I know it's, don't worry about it. And Ippei said, well, technically I was, and it's all over for me. And that, I don't know if the bookie the whole time knew that, like, it was in Shohei's name, this account. That's the thing that makes it look a little sketch. But if you step back to realize that this Ippei Mizuhara was basically fronting it all as Shohei Ohtani, and he let the bookmaker think it was Shohei because, hey, if they think Shohei's backing this finance, then maybe they'll be willing to continue extending credit. And if I can just win that next one, I'm going to be out of this hole and I'll be raking in the cash. Like, I think that's how he was thinking. And it's not logical, but I think that's how this ended up getting as far as it did. But then in that moment where he said, actually, technically, I was kind of stealing the money from him and it's over for me, the bookie had, if they thinking, oh, crap. Like, either that or he knew the whole time what was going on and just kind of, as long as the money was coming in, just didn't really have to mentally square that circle and think about it. So that's like maybe one of the questions that I would still have, and we may never know the answer to. Another question I would still have, and this is in there as well in the criminal complaint, the amount of money that he lost, that Ippei Mizuhara lost, a total amount of losing bets of $182,935,206.68. Granted, he had winning bets of $142,256,000. So this guy, I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars were being won and lost, and the total balance is a negative $40.67 million. So if he lost $40 million, 16 of it he stole from Ohtani to cover. I don't know what the other 24 is. That info may be in here. It may be that, he ended up owing all that $24 million, and he was just so far behind when the what hit the fan that I guess that money just never got accounted for. But between February 2022 and October 2023, there was an account that wired at least $15 million to this other bank account. And some of those wires coincided with communications between Mizuhara and Bookmaker One, where Mizuhara stated that he had recently wire transferred funds to the account. And it was $40,000 here, $40,000 there. I think they figured out a way eventually to be doing $500,000 chunks. But my goodness. My goodness. And then there's another element of this that's downright bone-chilling. I want to make sure I can find this here. There was a moment where a sort of threat was levied, certainly I think against Ippei, but you can also see an angle where this is gnarly and scary for Shohei himself. It was after that text. I was reading from this same thread earlier where the bookmaker said, to be honest, as long as you can guarantee the 500, I think that means 500K, every Monday, I'll give you as much as you want because I know you're good for it. I just have to explain it to my partner. That was from June. And then November. So we're talking, 5-6 months later. Bookmaker One messages Mizuhara. Hey, Ippei, it's 2:00 on Friday. I don't know why you're not returning my calls. I'm here in Newport Beach, and I see victim A. The name is redacted, but I think we know who we're talking about here. Victim A walking his dog. I'm just going to go up and talk to him and ask how I can get in touch with you since you're not responding. Please call me back immediately. Man. So, like, you're talking about Ippei. Ippei might be lucky to be alive that this all was uncovered by, federal investigators. IRS don't play. I think the guy that's like on a lot of this investigation, I think it's actually Internal Revenue Service. Could be wrong about that. One of the agents I saw that was involved in this. So, I mean, you could have been in a kneecaps kind of situation. But the fact that this guy's going, hey, I see Shohei here walking his dog. I'm going to go up and talk to him and see maybe why you're not calling me back. Is that cool with you? Call me back. That's a veiled threat right there. That's scary, dude. That's scary. And I don't know if that, again, I think that's just to put a scare into Ippei, but it also shows what the bookie knew, right? I think he knew that Ohtani didn't know what this was all about, because that's kind of what the sinister implication of that threat is. Like, hey, I'm gonna out you to Ohtani. I know where this money's really coming from, and I know he's got nothing to do with it. So you better figure this out. That's sinister, man. That's at least the implication that I hear reading that. That's what I hear reading that. And then I'm going to read some of this from the Reddit baseball, our baseball thread, because it kind of has some bullet points that I think are going to be interesting to people. So again, I don't know if anybody's super duper interested in this, but with no Cardinal game today, I wanted to kind of jump in and compile some of the most notable elements of this thing, so you could feel like you're at least a little bit more informed about what's going on if you hear people talking about this. And this is from our baseball. It's a screenshot that John Boy posted on Twitter. He said, "Is there ever well, it's a typo. Has there ever put any?" My goodness, I'm going to sound drunk reading this, but I'm not. Has there ever put this much effort into stealing hundreds of millions and come away with less than Ippei? He ended up with some massive debt and some baseball cards, because it said Ippei didn't just steal money for gambling, but multiple other leisure purchases, including over $325,000 to buy baseball cards on eBay. Yep, he's in the hobby. Ippei's in the hobby, evidently. He also told the bookmaker he lost a bunch on crypto, and so maybe can they settle on an amount that would be fair? Like, can I not pay everything I owe? Maybe just some of what I owe. I've had a tough run of it on the crypto streets. Like, this guy was clearly, doing a lot of different things to try and come into some money in some not sustainable ways, right? But I'm going to read from this. I'm going to trust our baseball, and the fact that John Boy posted this tells me that, this is vetted enough that I think everything you're going to see in here was also from the criminal complaint. Ippei set up, because you might wonder, how did this happen in the first place? How possibly did nobody notice 16? Like, I would say, who among us hasn't had a stray 16 milli go missing and you just don't notice it for a while? But that's obviously being facetious. How does 16 milli go and get siphoned out of your accounts and you don't know it? How do the financial advisors, like, presumably Ohtani's got a money guy besides Ippei, I would think, but maybe he didn't. I mean, I know that he did, but I think there was this level of access that Ippei had that was unprecedented and unparalleled within the group, within the Ohtani, sphere, within his universe. Ippei set up Ohtani's bank account for him since he arrived in the U.S. Ippei was the one responsible for making all purchases for Shohei to help him get settled in the country. Within a few years, Mizuhara changed the settings on Ohtani's account and linked his phone. So now the bank account that was set up to put MLB checks into, probably direct deposit, that's now linked to Mizuhara's phone directly. He had full access to Ohtani's account since that time, whenever that took place. And I'm sure that's in the criminal complaint, but I'm reading the bullet points from our baseball. So that's something. I think it was a bank account in Arizona. I saw a screenshot elsewhere where he takes Shohei there. Yeah, I'll set you up. And if you're Shohei, you're just playing ball. In the same way that the players want the agents to deal with the agent stuff, I don't think these guys are checking their bank accounts every day necessarily. He's just focused on winning baseball games. So it feels a little far-fetched, but at the same time, I think you could, understanding the world that these guys are in, it's not that hard to imagine that it just might not have been his main focus. If you've got all the money in the world, you might just not be counting every dollar. You're grateful and feel blessed to be in the spot you're in, but you might not necessarily be, opening up the old banking app every single day. I don't know. I probably would if it were me, just to look at it and marvel at it and be like, this is awesome. But I don't know. Ohtani was like trying to be the best baseball player in the world, so that takes some of your time up too, I suppose. Here's another bullet point. Prosecutors have forensic computer evidence in the form of IP addresses and location data that show all the transfers and bets came from Ippei's house and devices. So not Ohtani's phone, right? They track these bets and they know where they came from. They know who was doing them. Now, yes, you could basically imagine that Ippei was placing the bets that Ohtani told him to place. But then when you see that there were over 19,000 wagers placed, 19,000, at an average wager price of $12,800. Yeah, I don't think you're having almost 20,000 wagers over a 3-year period that Shohei is going to find the time to be like, yeah, let's bet on all these college soccer games. Here's what I want you to place on my behalf, Ippei. No, I think sometimes it just looks like what it is. This guy was absolutely in deep on the gambling stuff and trying to invest in baseball cards and like the whole bit. Prosecutors have multiple phone recordings, again, back from the our baseball thread. Multiple call recordings with Ippei in the bank where Mizuhara is pretending to be Ohtani and is authorizing large wire transfers. So another element of this is, I wonder if this is even possible if there's not a bit of a language barrier, right? If you're the bank and you don't even know, you don't even know maybe what Ohtani sounds like, or I'm not like, that could have been a possible angle to allow this to go undetected for as long as it did. He said, "Oh, I'm Shohei Ohtani," and it's like, well, I don't know. This guy sounds like he kind of has an accent. Maybe he is. Like, I just don't know if they would have questioned it. And I don't know if that's as easy to have happen. I've never tried to, take some money from somebody in a wire transfer situation and pretend to be them. So I don't know how easy or difficult it might be to do, but it seems like one of those things that would be kind of tough to do. But if you're the banker, you go, I don't know. It kind of sounds like it might be him. Like, you would not want to think that they're, kind of profiling in that way. But like, I could see it happening. I could see that aspect of it happening. And I don't know. It seems to have happened in this case. The bank's probably got some questions to answer. Like, whatever bank this ended up being, boy, they've got some oversight issues. And they're probably going to be in some hot water with this as well. Prosecutors confiscated both Ohtani and Ippei's phones. So they did. They saw Ohtani's phones, and he wasn't logging into this betting website, whatever it was. They read every text and communication sent between the two over 7 years. There were 0 instances where betting or wiring money ever came up. That's unbelievable. I mean, it's not, because that's the story that's being told. So, but like, he was doing all this behind Ohtani's back, essentially. Thousands of messages between the two, or between Ippei and the bookmaker, including texts where Ippei admits to stealing from Ohtani, which we talked about that. That was not until March 20th, which is a little bit weird that it was after. Like, to me, that's not a smoking gun, because on March 19th, he told a story to Ippei told a story to ESPN about what had happened and that Ohtani knew about it and helped him out, paid off his debts for him. And then maybe, like, my theory was, well, the lawyers then got involved and said, no, you can't admit that, because Shohei would be in trouble for that too, because it's an illegal operation being investigated by the feds. So we can't have Shohei, it's on the record that we can't have that. I don't think that's what happened, though. I think at first it was like we just didn't have the information, so I thought, that sounds kind of sketch. Well, I think not the smoking gun on March 20th that he admits that he stole from Shohei and that it's over for him. The smoking gun to me is all the other texts, because that builds up a body of work there's proof there over the course of 3 years that was the pattern. It's like, oh, yeah, that looks exactly like what it would look like if this guy was in deep on gambling. All the gambling winnings that Ippei made were transferred into his own bank account, not Ohtani's, which is not a surprise. The bookmaker has admitted to prosecutors under oath that he knew Ohtani was not a client and that Ippei admitted the truth to him. Ippei didn't just steal money. I mentioned that the $325K on baseball cards. And prosecutors have every bet slip that was made with the bookmaker. Tens of thousands of bets. Ippei did not make any bets at all on baseball. And Ohtani didn't make bets or knew Ippei was betting or anything like that, which stands to reason, because he probably didn't have time for that. He was playing baseball at a very, very high level. So I read the thing about the dog. That was something that I wanted to make sure to mention, because it's kind of a wild one. What do you guys think out there? Is there anybody out there that still is like, no, Ohtani, this is a cover-up. Ohtani did it. Because I got to tell you, I don't think, was there a sliver of possibility in my mind a couple weeks ago before all this comes out as this was unfolding where I'm like, yeah, man, their stories didn't really add up. At this point, I've seen enough. I've seen more than enough. If you read the criminal complaint, that's a lot of evidence. Unless you're going to credit Rob Manfred and Major League Baseball with being able to sway the IRS and the federal government to keep quiet about something like this and not implicate Shohei or not implicate that they were betting on baseball. If you think that, if you've got your tinfoil hat on, more power to you, but no way, dude. There's not a bone in my body anymore that thinks that Shohei had any idea what was going on. I think this Mizuhara guy took him for a ride, and it's really sad because Shohei trusted the dude. And you could have all the money in the world, man, but that's tough to trust anybody again, right? That's tough. Now, yeah, Shohei was probably a little bit naive to entrust that level of access and power to a dude, but that's the thing. Like, when you are in that position, you're not doing all that yourself. You got to have people in your corner, and he thought he did, and this guy wasn't. That's the way it looks now. And that's the story that I believe is the case. And I think he was so in deep about everything with the lies that there were very few people who knew what was going on until it all started to come out. It was weird the way, and this was all part of the story a few weeks ago when it all came out, but the way that the Dodgers kind of had the clubhouse meeting where Ippei admitted things, and they had a separate interpreter that had to kind of interpret what the guy was saying in Japanese so the Japanese players could kind of know, because they got Yamamoto there, and there were like multiple interpreters helping to interpret the situation as Mizuhara was coming clean to the Dodgers. But even that's what tipped off Shohei, because he's like, well, that's not what he even told me was going on. Like the stories were inconsistent because it continued to change for Mizuhara as he tried to kind of get out from under this thing, and it became impossible. He knew he was cooked. So crazy, crazy, crazy story. I think hopefully it's one that Ohtani can just put behind him and make a bunch of more money so he won't hardly miss it. The $16 million that was stolen. I don't know what happens. I guess Mizuhara becomes responsible for that, but if he's convicted or whatever, but you probably file bankruptcy, you're probably in prison. Like he's in deep. The scale of this thing was just almost unfathomable. $40 million in losses on credit. Crazy. What do you think about this, baseball fans, Cardinals fans? Do you have thoughts on this? I know this is not our typical type of podcast, but I just wanted to kind of talk about what occurred to me to talk about from that whole thing. And the Jordan Montgomery thing, I think, is kind of interesting, too. So that's what we got for you for tonight's podcast. I hope it gets you through Friday morning. By the way, if you happen to be listening to this late Thursday night and you're wanting more actual Cardinals content and just general content with me involved, Hot Take Central, Friday morning, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. on 590 The Fan, KFNS in St. Louis, 590thefan.com. You can stream live if you're not in the radio listening area. Cam Jansen, I think, will be there tomorrow. I think the Cat will be on the road, but maybe he'll call in. Jim the Cat Hayes might call in for the show. Myself, Cole Bartimas will be there. Maybe there will be some other fun, a guest host, something that I'm not even aware of yet because they haven't gotten into the studio. But if you want to have something to pass the time on Friday morning and you already listened to this, well, 7 to 10 a.m., 590thefan.com. You can stream in, you can call in, you can text in. It's a fun show. So hope you guys join us. And if you don't, well, it's up on podcast later too. Not on the B Shafe Daily Spotify feed, but nevertheless out there somewhere. All right. That's going to do it for this edition of the show. Thank you guys for joining me. We'll talk to you next time on B Shafe Daily. Peace.